I'm here to give everyone a bit of an update on what's happening with Zephyr these days, and so I'm going to go through pretty much the whole swath of it pretty quickly. And so by all means, if we don't get much time at the end, and I didn't put a phone up, so if someone could give me a 5-minute warning, that would be helpful. Basically, I've been with the Zephyr project since it started, and we've been using it as a sandbox for trying to do best practices, pretty much for open source, and that's been paying off for us. So for those who are not familiar with Zephyr, it's an open source RTOS, and it has under Apache licensing. It is very modular, and we started with the focus of going after safety and security at the very start. So what's happened in 2025? We just finished putting out the 4.1 release, and in there we now have the initial support for Rust. Thank you to David Brown, and if you want to learn more about that, there'll be a session right after this talking about, 2 sessions talking about this. So I would encourage you if you're interested in that. We also have a commercial compiler supporting, so LLVM is now supported as well. And there's more and more boards being added every day. In fact, there's more and more products now showing up in the market every day too. It's been really exciting for me. Because you don't know where your open source project is being used, it's a bit of a sleuthing game. And when you find some new ones that are interesting, it's always fun. So if anyone knows of products using Zephyr that are not visible here, please come tell me, because it's part of what makes me happy. The Samsung's Galaxy Ring, we found that from the fact sheet in Korean. It wasn't in the North American one, it was on the Korean one. We also know that there's Zephyr's up in a satellite now, and I have word of mouth that it's on the moon, but I don't have any more things than someone at a startup basically telling me that they had done it. But you can sort of see it's being used in a lot of very interesting spaces, and quite frankly, including all the Chromebooks, any of the firmware coming out of your current laptops these days is likely running Zephyr. That's using x86-based processors. It's in hearing aids. So it's starting to be very applicable in a wide range of sectors. And, from wind turbines, there's over 7,500 forks of it, which gives you an indicator of some of the products that might be out there. It's pretty much catching all the major hardware architectures at this point in time. There's some discussions of some new ones showing up, and they'll probably be landing before the next LTS. The software stack is very complete at this point. There's things I'd like to see added in. Matter, for instance, and some other things like that. But we have a lot of the capabilities out there already there for people to build on top of and just configure in and make it work. And this has all been integrated together and tested together, which is part of why a lot of people are going to Zephyr. There's 250 sensors already integrated, for instance, and there's over 750 boards in our repo. So there's a lot of good starting points for people to build from. And one of the things that I find interesting, CNCF goes and looks at what's actually happening in terms of open source projects so these are logarithmic scales. And CNCF, Kubernetes and OpenTelemetry, right? They're going after Linux. However, Zephyr's number 5 out of all the LF projects, which is, something that's, we were for a while, but then they brought in PyTorch last year. So, but in last year we sort of hit into that realm. And what was even more interesting to me is when they also looked across all the open source projects. Again, things like Nixos and so forth are all there. We're number 25 out of all open source projects for something that didn't exist 10 years ago. And it's been a bit of and quite frankly, it's an embedded project too. It's not a cloud thing. Which is, makes me very, very happy. And it's got a very wide, diverse set of people participating into it. And so that is all helping to have a good mix of resilience into the project. And in terms of the features, well, obviously device tree, people love it or hate it. It seems to be that way inclined, but it's very powerful. And the same way for the Linux kernel, it's very powerful, and it's part of the success of Zephyr in my mind. Our tool for building makes it easy for people to build what they need. We have a wide range of connectivity options, which you saw from the stack before. And we also have a native IP stack, so we basically have a lot of this stuff under our control, and we're not so much subject to some of the external vulnerabilities in other people's stacks. We were actually, the FNet stuff a while back was one of the ones during our transition. But, we've got most of the key capabilities at this point now, as well as we try to stay on the bleeding edge, quite frankly, for Bluetooth. We work with the Bluetooth SIG and have things tend to get proven out with Zephyr before the standards are released now. And that's been very valuable for Zephyr. And then obviously on the USB front, USB-C and USB 2. We have a pretty strong story. Power management's obviously key. We've got a lot of capabilities for helping to customize to that in the project. And then secure boot management. Again, I will refer you to David, who's sitting here in the front row, who can talk more about MCU boot than I can. But we do have a lot of capabilities for updating and authenticating and booting.
Thank you for spelling it right.
Did I?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. We do have cryptographic APIs support, as well as some of the trusted firmware already integrated into the project. And we are built on POSIX, so you can run Zephyr apps as native Linux, and you can also, you can do it from both sides. And that lets us reuse things through the API services, which helps with simulation and doing a lot of our testing in cloud environments and so forth. So keeping things up to date and working has obviously been a focus. It is a real-time OS. We are starting to do some more benchmarking these days to prove it. And we're starting to pay more attention to performance after a couple of reviews last year. We have more and more graphical interfaces surprisingly getting integrated. So this sort of aspect, we're starting to see little monitors showing up on things. And so there's at the ecosystem page at the end, you'll see more. There's a fairly rich set of inter-process communications working right now, and this is pretty much going to be the core of what we'll certify, just for reference. We've got a fair amount of the logging and the tracing framework. So as you can see, it's grown from just like a small kernel to a fairly extensive system that you can build from, and that's a challenge. So in terms of security with Zephyr, the last LTS came out last year. For those who want to understand what we do with LTSs, we're following a model like the kernel, Linux kernel, where we have development going on regularly. The stats on this one, and I think it's 2.4 commits an hour right now, are going into here. Every 2.5 years we cut one of these, and we keep that up to date with safety and security over time. In fact, we just finished changing our support window in March from 2.5 years to 5 years to align up and make it easier for people complying with the CRA. Okay, so the project is going to be actually doing this a little bit better. Everything is published on our websites, and as you can see, 2029 is sitting there now for our support window for that one, as per the vote. But usually we sort of keep things going until our LTS with sort of an extended window beyond the next release. And that's where the security team puts fixes and backports into for us, and that you can pick up from the community. As you can see, for our LTS1 and LTS2, we've put out multiple updates and releases when we had enough security fixes. So we are being very transparent about doing the updates and making it visible out there. We're one of the 5th open source projects to get the best practices badge. That was about 5 or 6 years ago now. We initially started passing it. We failed for a while. We took it seriously. We actually got past it. We got to gold, and we've kept it at gold since then. Zephyr is actually a CVE numbering authority, so a lot of the processes are going to be looked for projects and stewards with the European Union. We're already doing with the US government here. And so we're waiting to figure out more of the details about who our CSERT's going to be, what database we're going to have to keep monitoring. But we've done this process for several years. And we're just going to have to adjust to a few more endpoints. And I'm praying they're going to federate the numbering systems. In 21, we moved our infrastructure for vulnerability managing over to GitHub and using that infrastructure. And we've done about 68 since then. We also have a way that product makers can register with us to be notified under embargo. And we've been getting more and more adding themselves in now. And so when we have a vulnerability that we've worked on and it's under embargo, it may be fixed upstream or not, but we're telling them so that they can work on their remediation plans too, which will be very useful for the CRA and we're hoping to see more people register their products here. We've had also SBOM generation since 21 in this project, automatically in our build scripts. That's all it takes to generate SBOMs in Zephyr. Literally, that's it, before you do your builds. And if you look at Antmicro's Renode dashboard, they've got over 875 boards in there. And every one of those that says built, passed, or generated has 3 SBOMs. 2 sources, one for the source of Zephyr, one for the source of the app, and then one for a build SBOM, which links back in an authenticated way with hashes to the sources. So you have the full traceability you're going to need for security and for safety analysis. And that's what it looks like. And so you can sort of see the linkage is through those hashes and crossing to the different documents. And quite frankly, that lets you know exactly, how this .a file, like your .a library was generated from which .c's, how your ELF image was coming from which .a's and .c's. So you actually have that traceability down to the specific file level available to you without doing anything else other than putting those options on your build. Security group meets every 2 weeks or so. We have a committee that's linked to the that's for the members, and that's where we sort of decide the PCERT processes and any financial asks that we want to make of the project. The security working group, though, is focused on publicly documenting security standard work, involving the security processes, code analysis tools, and so forth. And anyone is welcome to show up at these. The work happened on some of the publicly documenting in our docs YETSI, 303-645, and so that's sitting up there. And we actually did commission an audit last year. See earlier comment about finances with the NCC group, which had done one for us before, had done one on us before, and they found a few issues, but nothing was terribly severe. So that was a reassuring sign in some ways for us. And we did learn some lessons out of this audit, and defining the scope is hard, but the threat models and doing the exercise is very useful, and more people should be doing it for their projects. And so we have some, we're continuing to enhance and align the fuzzing of libraries and systems and working with improving our system over time. There's a good talk that David and Flavio did last year that I would encourage you to go watch if you're really interested in the security details. And then for those of you who are interested about the steward, I've been doing some work with the security committee and as work with the OpenSSF to go through what's happening for the CRA and CRA readiness for it. And for the most part, as you can see, we've pretty much got everything sort of ready enough to do it until we actually learn some details from the EU. But once we learn that, I think we should be able to adapt our processes and go forward. So we've got a pretty consistent story, I think, right now for security with Zephyr. This is part of having best practices and trying to apply best practices. What's going on with safety? Well, by safety, what we're talking about is functional safety. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have Zephyr ready as a component to go into a system, okay? And so that software is capable of performing intended is what we have to demonstrate for safety. Okay, that's the big subtlety here. And so there's a lot of standards that have aligned themselves around the concept of a V model, where you say what you're going to do, and then you break it down, and then you prove it all the way back up. Our certification focus right now is we are going to be going as, we're going after SIL 3 with the root 3S for that, people who understand that, and we're basically doing this as a safety element out of context, okay? And we also have approval to fund, and we have plans for how we'll do it, going after 26.26.2, and we think we can go for ASIL-D with that one. Okay, so this methodology is similar to the one that Zen is using, and we're moving it forward. So we're making sure we can pull the evidence together, and we're showing a methodology up in public with Zephyr. So Zephyr will be linking the code to the requirements to the test, and everything is out in the open. And we're showing the pattern, and there's a subset of that we'll take through. So you'll be able to see if you want things that we don't go through that pattern with, you see the pattern to follow that the assessors will be familiar with from Zephyr, which is linking the code and documentation together with the requirements, code documentation test. And so the status today for this is we've basically applied most of the MISRA guidelines. We want to apply it into the code base. We have static analysis working. We've got reference requirements, and traceability has already started into the code base. And creating automatic human-readable requirement documentation with StrictDoc. There's prototypes up there for people to look at. And as of December, we actually got our phase 1 concept approval from TÜVSÜD on this. And so if we follow the plans we've outlined, we should be able to, in a good chance to get the phase 2 concept, which will be the safety certification. So we're working this is the main focus of the safety architect and the safety committee, as well as the safety working group. The safety working group is the one that is requirements and finishing off the requirements and the traceability. That's our critical path, okay? So when are we done? Depends on how many people are working on things and how much on the requirement stuff, as it is with most open source. We have our safety working group that is open to everyone. So if you're interested in this, please participate. If you want to start looking at figuring out how to document requirements, it's the place to start working. And quite frankly, if you're interested in testing, we welcome your input to make sure we're linking things properly, because we're going to have to show code coverage eventually. Okay? So how does this all play in the overall RTOS landscape? This is a question I frequently get asked. So last night, fresh off the press, I sat there and I pulled all this information out of Git. And as you can see, more people contributed to Zephyr in the last month than have contributed to some of these other RTOSs in their entire lifetime. Okay? And we have a variety, and you can replicate my results by literally going to GitHub and looking at each of these products. Okay? And so these are pretty much all the main ones. If someone sees a name that I removed embed because embed was formally deprecated about 1.5 years ago, and it hasn't had any activity. That's why embed's not on there. But if there's an RTOS that you're aware of that I'm not tracking, please come tell me afterwards. I'd appreciate it, because I like to keep an eye on this. And like I say, the Linux kernel by comparison is about 9 commits an hour. And then when you plot things over time, our unique contributors, as you can see, has continued to go up, and that's per month. Same with, and then obviously the commits go up by month when the contributors do. And one of the interesting stats we just figured out was looking at the boards over time. And as you can see, the boards have been continuing to go up as well. And developers like it. They keep on giving us stars, so we're going to take it and say thank you very much. But we're seeing about 1,200 almost unique clones a day and a large number of visitors. So the code base is active, even though we don't know who it is. This is a frustration of open source. This is why I care about. Please tell me what the products, because it motivates developers. We've got a pretty good ecosystem, right? Available right now to us. We've got a wide variety of IDEs now integrated. We integrated in beyond the LLVM. We've got IAR now as a commercial offering, which is part of the safety story for us, quite frankly, because they are a certified compiler, and as part of the whole safety story, we have to have built with tool chains have to be certified as well with this. So we've got those pieces coming into play. We've got some emulators and simulators available. There's more and more people adding every day for training, which is exciting, and doing services and consulting. A lot of the ecosystem in Zephyr has been moved forward by people consulting out to do certain specific tasks, and that has helped. Obviously, we have the embed TLS, PSA firmware, and trusted firmware all integrated. We're seeing a lot of the MLs, and we see Zephyr being used on the resource-constrained edges for pulling in sensor data, doing some processing on it, and then communicating. Again, it's a power story and how you balance your power out. We've got more and more language runtime showing up. CircuitPython just finished moving over to Zephyr. It's moving over right now. And obviously, we've got Rust now integrated in, as well as MicroPython we've had for a while. And we've got a wide range of libraries starting to show up. Remote management systems, because of these deep remote edges and updating firmware and everything else, we've got several options in the ecosystem now. And I was mentioning those graphical interfaces. So LVGL and Slint are working with Zephyr now, and MicroEdge and Qt Group have joined in because they went and they looked and went, oh, we're going to experiment. And then they realized, oh, sure, we've got all of these products now we can offer. So it became a very compelling offering from them, and that's why they joined the project as members, which helps the project at the end of the day, because a lot of resources are there. And we do have a fair amount of work going on with some of the Ross communities, and I'd like to see more. Zephyr wouldn't be possible without our support from our platinum members and our silver members. These are the ones that are helping to fund, things like our safety analysis, some like security audits and so forth, and keep the infrastructure going. Cariad is interested in automotive, Zeiss is medical, and then you see a variety of semiconductors and so forth. So this is part of what the ecosystem's like for Zephyr, and we're now actually at 31 members in their silver classification, and we're seeing more and more leadership emerge in some of these areas some of them will probably be going to the board level eventually from the discussions I've been having with them. So we actually have and thank you very much to Lenaro. You've been with us pretty much since the start of this project, and we really appreciate it. Getting the ARM ecosystem involved. Lenaro was, I think, the 4th organization to join the project right after we launched. And so, as you can see, most of the ecosystem for Zephyr is ARM. About, on that dashboard, 750, well, the dashboard for Renode, I'd say ARM is probably about 80 to 90% of all the boards on there. Okay, ARM architectures. So if you're interested in participating more, these are the links. You've got access to all these slides. They've been uploaded, hopefully on the system now. And I am happy to answer any questions. So I'll leave it on that one. Does anyone have any questions or curiosities? Go for it, Bill.
Any talk of adding a gold star to the board certification? Because if you look at a lot of the boards, they're UART and timer only, and it's like, okay, well, this gets me started, but it's not really supported. So yeah, it was nice when the project was starting, but I think we need a higher tier for that.
You're hitting a subject near and dear to my heart. I've been trying to talk to the board about having a certification program in terms of what does it mean to be Zephyr and things to be quote-unquote certified by Zephyr, and I would welcome a chance to engage with you on some ideas on how we could structure this. I started socializing it last year. I think because Zephyr has gotten so big, people are maybe starting to call themselves Zephyr when they're not really a Zephyr thing, and we're needing to start caring about that and policing that. At least that was the guidance I'd gotten from the lawyers at the Linux Foundation. So watch this space, and I'm happy to engage with anyone who wants to talk about this. Any other questions? Okay, sure.
Thank you. So this is more a curiosity thing. You mentioned before that you start paying more attention to performance, and I'm curious whether the microkernel architecture is getting in the way of that, or if it's a non-issue.
Pretty much it's a non-issue. Okay. And the complex, like I say, we initially started off with a nanokernel on the project, and we were finding that was confusing people too much. And so as about the second year into it, basically they consolidated the kernels, and then it started really taking off. So we started off with that nanokernel approach initially, and it didn't buy us enough to justify the complexity. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully I found the session useful. And if you want Zephyr stickers, I brought them here. They're right there. Help yourself. Thanks.